I'm Poppy Tooker, and this is Louisiana Eats.
On the way to California, and I don't mean California, literally.
As Cal Peternell told us, one of the reasons Chez Panisse has been so successful is because of their access to Northern California's bountiful agriculture, which includes everything from produce to meats to cheeses. If you ever find yourself on the West Coast and decide to meander through the rolling hills of Sonoma County, you should consider looking for Bellwether Farms, California's first sheep's dairy and a cheese producer for restaurants like Chez Panisse. Get there early enough and you'll find Liam Callahan busily milking the 250 ewes that graze his family farm's hills and pastures.
Dairy animals want this to happen. If they don't want to, they don't give you milk. One of the funny things is the ones that are most engaged with the process, the ones that give you the most milk, are always the ones that come in first. And the ones that are at the end of the string are the ones that are like, I'm kind of really not that into this. You know, I could do without. And they also give you the least amount of milk.
It was about 10 in the morning when we met Liam in the milking parlor, but he was already finished cleaning up from the morning session.
Sheep milk out very quickly, so it really takes as much time to prepare them and clean them and everything as it does just to milk them. The cows milk a lot longer. To give you an idea, the smallest cows, like a Jersey, may give you 5 gallons of milk a day. The super high production cows, the Holsteins, the black and white ones, they can give you 12 gallons of milk a day. A sheep, we're happy if we can average half a gallon of milk a day.
Not one to be frivolous with time, Liam quickly led us into the cheese room where he was making 2 types of cheeses.
It gets a little steamy in here. We've added exhaust fans and that sort of stuff over the years, so it's not as bad. It used to be an immediate, like a sweat hut. You know, you got in here and you just sweated through your clothing, and that was how it was. So it's a little bit more comfortable now than it once was, but it's still pretty foresty, you know, tropical for sure.
Now to clarify, Bellwether Farms is a sheep's dairy, but they also make cow's cheese there.
Our cow's milk is all Jersey milk. We buy from a neighbor down the street who milks all the little brown cows. The milk is higher in fat than other breeds of cow, which gives you a little bit more of a flavor element that you get from that we like.
Liam had 9 plastic buckets lined up, each filled with 9 gallons of pasteurized cow's milk. With a few steps, these vats of milk would become crescenza, a soft, ripened cheese that Liam learned to make in northern Italy.
The same basic steps are still being used by cheesemakers. We initiate a fermentation in the milk, and then we figure out a way to drain off the excess water. Now, by changing the rate of fermentation, the timing of it, and by changing the rate of moisture loss, you affect the chemistry that's going on, which is how you start every single cheese from using the same ingredients.
To start the fermentation, Liam adds a particular batch of cultures to the milk. These bind the proteins together, thereby changing the milk's texture.
And you can make your own cultures, but it's a pretty tricky thing, and you can get off track really easily. And there's enough areas to get off track that I just like to start with a fresh batch every time. So this is made in France. It's a strain that I know works very well for this cheese. And then this culture only waits about 20 minutes before I'm going to add the coagulant, which is what changes the protein. Let me get the mix and thermometer. I'll be right back.
While the procedure might be the same for virtually every cheese, variables like time, temperature, and technique all come into play.
You give the bacteria 20 minutes or so to get started. Different recipes call for different periods of time because, again, the 2 things we're controlling is the rate of fermentation and the rate of drainage. So it gets kind of into the chemistry side of it. which is kind of a neat side of it, but it's a hard side if you're not actually out of vat regularly and see how some of these things affect the outcome.
Once the milk is fermented, enzymes like rennet are added to help the cheese coagulate. This separates the solids from the liquids, the curds from the whey, and you can either use a natural or synthetic rennet.
We use the vegetarian on our cow milk cheeses. It's another thing that you see the benefits of it, using natural rennet if you're going to age the cheese longer. We did some taste tests, and if you're not going to go much over 60 days, you don't really start to see more complex flavors that you get from the natural rennet. So you might as well use one of the vegetable substitutes. They're less expensive as well. I visited cheesemaker in Sardinia where they actually had a bucket of salt that they kept on the floor, but they had a bucket of salt and this dried up, looked like a piece of roadkill really, but it was lamb stomach. And they would just cut a piece off, mash it up with some water, it looked kind of like anchovy paste, and throw it right in the milk.
So they just took the stomach and kept it in salt.
That's it. They dry it so that it doesn't rot, and the enzymes are in that stomach.
The crescenza lumps together as a block and must be mixed by hand very gently so the curd doesn't fracture. But not every cheese has to be handled this delicately. Liam was also in the process of making a creamy cheese inspired by an Italian pecorino. When they began making this style of cheese at Bellwether Farms, they named it Carmody, after a road that borders the farm.
At this point, it's ready. We can cut it, and that starts letting the whey drain out.
Liam had a 400-gallon stainless steel vat of cow's milk, ready for the next step.
So the first cut we do will be a horizontal one, and then I'll come through and do the vertical one.
As Liam got to work, I thought about how physically demanding a cheesemaker's day is. Every day, they begin by corralling the animals, laying hands on each one as they're milked. Then there's buckets of milk to carry around, and the upper body workout from stirring enormous batches of cheese before shaping it into wheels.
It gets pretty heavy when it's this full. The sheep milk is a lot heavier because it has about 50% more solids. Yeah, I know how many passes I need to make to get the right drainage. And it changes with every vat too. So when you go to a new vat, you have to try it a few different ways.
Cheese making is definitely a scientific process, but a lot of craftsmanship is also involved.
This 400 gallons is probably going to give us about 115 wheels. Then they go onto our turning tables where they'll stay for the next couple hours. Flip, flip, flip in order to get the rind consistent in form. Then it'll go into our first aging room, a low temperature room. It's going to stay there the next couple of days. That slows the drainage. We're able to salt it there. We come out of that with an actual cheese ready to go on a board and be aged out the rest of the way.
The Carmody wheels sit in a dry, cool room for 60 days, where they'll each lose about a pound of moisture. By the time they're ready for market, these cheeses, like all cheeses, will develop a flavor uniquely tied to the dairy where they're made.
You know, it's funny, in Italy and many parts of Europe, they have amazing traditions, and in many ways they're really trapped by them. You know, those guys that are making sheep milk cheeses over there, they have a relatively limited period of time, and they wouldn't even think to say, well, maybe we could find someone with some cows and we could bring in and make cheese off our peak season to keep our equipment running, or, you know, whatever. But they look at it as just another season that they're not making cheese. And I said, well, I'm trying to, impart a little California wisdom into this. I said, California, we really enjoy the traditional recipes, but we also enjoy seeing how they work with our ingredients, so that the tradition is the technique, not necessarily the ingredient. And then we have other cultures there, so we see how that technique might work on ingredients from other cultures. He says, no, the recipes were perfect. They did not need to be changed. It was all right, you can do what you want.
Cheeses made by Liam Callahan at Bellwether Farms are available at the finest cheese shops across America.